Hi, my name is Derrick G. I will do a formal introduction of Nick as well, but Nick is here.
Hello, my name is Nick.
And what are we doing here on a Sunday night in a bar? I have my chilled red. Thank you for the recommendation for that. I will get more flushed myself over the course of this evening, like the red. We are here. I've been thinking about what this is. Formally, this is a conversation with a co-director of a very special series, a documentary series called A Century in Sound. And before I introduce that, I think what I would like and hope that you take away from this is not only learning about what Nick has learnt very deeply about the topic that some of you may have seen the documentary at the Melbourne International Film Festival today. There's another screening later this coming week. But I hope that you can walk away with this as an appreciation for music in a new way, and a way that perhaps we can observe and respect another culture that does it so differently to us, and how exciting that can be, how enriching that can be, how fascinating it is. And so to introduce our relationship, my name's Derrick. I talk about music on the internet is kind of how I summarize it. Some of you may know me from that. And Nick was a guest on my podcast, Speaks Volumes, and we were kind of kindred spirits in many ways. We are people that dig our heads deep into music and vomit it out on people in different forms.
That's a really good way to put it.
And then I was in Tokyo 4 weeks ago, and he took me around to these places that he told me about and that were in the documentary, and just colored everything in a lot more. And he said he was going to be in Melbourne, and I'm from Sydney, and I said, let's continue the conversation. Yeah. So I'd like to welcome and set up this talk. Nick Dwyer has made a documentary, The Century in Sound, that I would love for you to introduce what it is, who you are, and why are you here?
Wow. Yeah, there's a few things there, but look, first of all, thank you, all of you, as Derrick pointed out, to come out on a school night. It means a lot. I mean, just for us to be in Melbourne, and when I say us, I'm talking about my co-director too, and our DOP Tim, who will be coming here at some point later on this evening. But you know, this series, it's taken 9 years to get out into the world, and it's just a culture that I've just fallen completely in love with, pretty much from the moment I had contact with it. And you know, we can go deeper into that in a second. But for the longest time, there were so many problems, so many obstacles, booby traps, hurdles that happened, and there was a long time there where it didn't even look like we were going to even be able to screen it. So just to be in the city, we I don't know, was anyone at the screening today? Okay. Oh wow. Okay. So a few people. And is anyone going to see it on Tuesday?
Raise your hands even if you're not.
Okay. And look, if anyone missed out on tickets, because we did sell out. But there's another screening they've just announced for Thursday, so you've got an opportunity to see it again. But all of this is just crazy. It's like, I don't want to take anything away from production. Like production, if anyone in this room has made a film or a documentary, it's hard. It's basically like playing a game of Donkey Kong, and someone's just throwing barrels at you the whole time, and you've got to dodge them and figure out solutions. But for us, once you kind of get the budget, the making it is a pure joy. But it's that whole thing of like, well, how do we get this out into the world? How do we get it so that everyone in the world can see it? And that's we're still on that path now, but we premiered in Copenhagen in March, and this is the second time we've screened it. So it's just such an honor to be able to be in the city and being able to screen this documentary called A Century in Sound. I didn't even answer any of your questions just then.
No, not at all.
That's just my way of saying thank you. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy with Umut and all the team, Philippa and everyone that's like, let us do this talk tonight. So yeah, so I'm happy to be here.
Tell us what it is, for those who haven't seen it. The elevator pitch, the way that you tell people what you've buried yourself in for the last few years.
So Century in Sound is a 6-part documentary series which tells a 100-year history of Tokyo through music and memory, and this very incredible, unique to Japan culture of what is known as ongaku kissa. And
which is a translation
so ongaku in Japanese means music, and kissa is short for Kissaten, which is basically a word that kind of started coming into use in the late 19th century, and it means coffee house or tea house. And coffee culture came into Japan. Japanese people took to it, and as this deep fascination that the Japanese people have had and still do with anything from outside. Once they get into something, they are so into it. In the early part of the 20th century, they started getting really into Western music, Western art, and these ongaku kissa became places where Japanese men and women could come and interact with Western music. And at that time, it was classical music.
I find what's really interesting about this is that on my podcast, on social media, when I shared it, it was a hot topic. It's something that people are fascinated by the idea of it. And I thought it was just my little bubble that I'm interested in it, but it seems like there's an obvious, maybe not obvious, but there's a fascination with Japanese culture because there's a dedication to how they, obsess over something and portray it back to us. But it's also about more and more places around the world are talking about kissa, talking about sound systems, talking about being intentional about listening. And I think we're all a bit like, what makes it special? What makes it real? What makes it? Who are the real ones and who are the fakers? And there's and this talk is not about calling out the fakers, but it is about like the truth of why this exists, and it exists from what I understand from you, from a historical standpoint of the war and the fascination with Western music and technology and things like that. Could you touch on just where these young Japanese people in the 20s were trying to achieve with these venues at the time?
I think there's a couple of things going on. And again, I don't want to kind of go too deep into history, which I always love doing given the opportunity. But one of the things that you kind of got to remember with the beginning of this culture is that Japan was closed off to the world for 250 years. A period which was called Sakoku. And then the Americans turned up in around 1857 or 8, I can't remember the exact date, and they kind of demanded that Japan opened up their borders. And Japan very quickly realized that the Industrial Revolution hadn't happened, and they were like, "Wow, we need to catch up." And they basically, sent all range of people to go overseas and learn and bring back all that knowledge. And so all of a sudden, all of these Western things started coming into the country. Art. Ideas from architecture, ideas from all over, scientific ideas, but music was something that really, it was just so new. Like all that existed in Japan was traditional music, and they had their versions of traditional music. And I'm going to jump forward a few years, but basically around the 1920s when these first ongaku kissa came, it was about creating an environment where people could listen to music and have an experience to music that was akin to, say, going to an art gallery or something. There was a lot of other cafes that were kind of raucous affairs, and then the ongaku kissa was the beginnings of these places of respect and reverence.
Why do you think that the practice of listening seems to be more specific to Japanese culture?
I think that especially in, after World War II, And yeah, I don't want to give too much away because obviously, people can see the series. But these places served a very, very functioning role in society in that they were places of escape. I think people, for a start, no one could afford hi-fi, no one could afford records, and people would go there to forget about the problems of the day. And especially after the war, life was very, very tough for a lot of people. And people would, there's two things. One thing is just the respect and reverence that Japanese people have for the things that they love, especially from outside. But two, it just started to be caked into the culture that's what you do. When you go to these places, you're quiet and you just listen. And also Japanese people wanted to study the music. That was their way of trying to understand it, and they would do it in that mode. So they became places for listening and not for chatting.
And when we were in Tokyo, and Nick took me to some of these places, it's jarring,
right?
Because you go into these places, and many of them you're not meant to talk. They choose the menu or not menu based on the idea that it shouldn't make too much noise. It's solitary. You could go with a friend. We went together, but we sat separately and stared. And it's unusual. It's unusual because it feels
why was it unusual?
You kind of look at everyone and go, why are you all here? Like, I can appreciate music. We can all appreciate music, but it's like, to come on your own and just sit there and not be on your phone. And maybe it's a very 2024 thing. It's like, not be on your phone, I found it hard. And maybe that's because
I love it. And I think we kind of jumped straight into the history. And one thing I kind of jumped over was one of the first questions, which is I think maybe I should, introduce myself a little bit and how I got to this topic and why it hit me in the way it hit me. So I'm 44 now. And I've been working within music for 30 years. I started DJing on radio. I was a radio host from the age of 14 in New Zealand. And but when I was 15, I was a music TV host, working on a music TV channel back when music TV played music videos. I worked in record stores. I became so deeply passionate about jungle in real time when I was 15. And I was a club DJ. And then in all the music TV programs throughout the 90s and 2000s, I was the kind of club culture guy. I would present the video. I was really into house, techno, all of that. Like every twist and turn of club music, I was there, box seats, with my popcorn just waiting, ready. And then in the 2000s, I started working for this, I call it thing, but I started working for, it was called the Red Bull Music Academy. And a lot of, probably a lot of your favorite musicians and artists went through the Red Bull Academy, and it would be somewhere in the world, and there'd be conversations like this. And I was doing one of the kind of lecture hosts for that for a long time. And then I was making a TV series about music culture around the world. So for about 10 years there, I would travel all over Africa, Latin America, and make specific shows about kind of music culture. And some things were going on in my life when I was back in New Zealand. I was doing a breakfast radio show, and it was fucking awful. Sorry for swearing. It was a really weird time in my life, and I kind of lost track a little bit of who I was. When the radio station I worked for was starting to go very, very kind of commercial, and like rather than doing what Derrick does for a job, which is discovering music and sharing it with people. That's what I always did. And this, I had everything in my life kind of changed a little bit. And I've been going to Japan a lot. And so I felt kind of, for a start, that professionally and personally I was in a bit of a rut. And I decided to move to Japan to start anew, I guess, or be excited about music again. But the other thing was, I had always had records. I had always worked in record stores, as I said, always had like mentors, like if I was the guy ordering the jungle, I had the garage guy and the dancehall guy and the hip hop guy as my, to steal a Japanese term, senpai. They'd just be always feeding me music. So I always had like analog, music recommendations, and I loved that. And somewhere along the way in the 2000s, as music went digital, I stopped buying records. Something was missing, and I felt like my connection to music was changing. So all of this kind of hot mess of all of these things, sorry I'm giving you so much backstory, kind of culminated. I was searching for something, I didn't know what it was. I moved to Japan, and then I stepped into Lion, which is this 100-year-old classical music cafe, and all of a sudden it's in hushed reverential silence, and they're playing classical records over the most incredible PA. I was ready for it. Unlike the experience you had, I was like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. And I just sat there, and I was just like, I'm just being forced to listen right now, and I love it. And I just started to go there every single day. And then turned out the apartment that I was living in was 5 minutes away, and I started going every single day. I realized that, I very quickly realized that it's not just this one place. There's just places all over the city for every genre imaginable. And that was what kicked off a now 10-year obsession with all of these places, which has taken me to hundreds, maybe 300, 350 all around Japan. But so that's my backstory. That's how I came into it. Sorry again that it was a bit of a long one. But that was what brought me to these places. And I knew that that's what was missing in my life. So I'm curious as to your experience, which was kind of different to mine. And I guess maybe it's an age thing. I don't know. What do you think?
My experience of these places when I went.
You said when you stepped into Lion, you did feel it was awkward, but maybe in a positive way, was it?
Yeah, something I do want to bring up, which I guess is now, which is about the documentary obviously covers the sound, the people, the visuals, the history. And I've seen the 3 episodes, as have some of you in this series in today. What I didn't anticipate was everything else: the smell, the texture, sometimes how sticky something might be, the feeling, the vibe, for want of a better word, and it was equally fascinating as it was confronting, because I guess when you're talking about this stuff, this idea of listening culture is foreign to me and perhaps a lot of us, because there's club culture, there's like communal party culture, there's listening, we're in a bar and there's music playing, but there's like, we are listening. I'm looking at people and I'm like, what is, he's got his eyes closed. Is he asleep or is he actually listening? Yeah. Someone's doing their uni work. I'm like, oh, you're allowed to do that? Like, I know. It's just like, I didn't know. No, for sure. What's going on? What are the rules? Tell me, how do you, if I sit up, do I, like, can
it's a very squeaky floor too, by the way.
Yeah, and it's like, can I check my phone? Can I, there were so many questions. And the first thing, because it was lovely, because Nick said, meet me here, and he didn't tell me where we were going to go, and he said, we're going to Cafe Lion, which is the oldest one, it was 100 years old. And you open the door, and it had a smell, like decades of cigarette smoke absorbed into every pore of everything. A century of cigarette smoke is the name of the documentary. And I was like, all right, I'm smelling this place, I'm feeling this place, I'm looking around, and the vases have a yellowed from that same nicotine. It's like, okay. And then I think the thing that really, so they were playing a classical record as a classical kisser, and the thing that made it feel like I was in a film that really hit me the most was, should I impersonate it? I'm going to impersonate it. A lady, the host or whatever, just went up, grabbed the mic, fed back, and she just faced the wall and said, "This is Rachmaninoff," like in Japanese, obviously, Rachmaninoff's Fifth, and I was like, "What is she? Why isn't she facing us? Like, what's going on?" But it was all those senses that were firing of like, this is all about the music. 100%. This is all about the music. Everything else can just whatever. Yeah. How comfortable the chairs are, what the menu is, how it smells, how the person doesn't look at you when they're presenting the thing. And I was like, hold on a second, this is listening culture. I'm not used to this. Yeah. And you said in order to gain their trust to even film there, you've been hundreds of times before you even asked them.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I was living 3 minutes away. If anyone is familiar with Tokyo, how many people here have been to Tokyo? Okay, so everyone here has been to Shibuya, and then everyone that's been to Shibuya knows Dogonzaka, which is like where all the love hotels are. And basically, Cafe Lion is right smack bang in that love hotel area. When it was built up up the hill in 1926, there was nothing else there, and then that whole kind of red light district came in around it. But I was just living 3 minutes from that area, and I'd go there every single day, and because I knew that no one had filmed there, and as you know from being in there, there's very prominent no photography signs, and I just knew that I wanted to make a film about it, and I would just go every single day, and I'd kind of spent my whole career, as I said, working in radio and working in music TV and music discovery, and had kind of made a career out of like diving into a genre of music, be it calypso or Nigerian high life or whatever. But I'd never ever had an opportunity to dive into classical music, and I'd never ever had an opportunity to dive into jazz. And for me, I started going to Lion. It became school for me, and I would go and request, like Leonard Bernstein conducting something, and like Seiji Ozawa. Like I figured out classical music. I started to figure it out. I still am a long way to go. But I would just go and keep requesting records so I could kind of understand what was going on. And just after time, they're just like, hey, there's that weird guy. And, after a while, they're like, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from New Zealand. And is that New Zealand guy again? And this went on for years. And then finally in 2017, when we got the money to film 2 of the episodes, that's when I put it to them. And by then, the manager, who was a lovely guy, I think when we went in, Mori-san, incredible man, he was like, you really want to make this series, don't you? This film us, don't you? And I was like, yep. And he was like, you've been coming in for 2 years. And I'm like, yep. And he was like, I'll put it to the family. And they did, and they approved it. So, again, I don't know if I answered your question. I forgot what your question was. But here we are.
No, this is how it works.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the other thing to jump off the back of that about what you were able to achieve and what I experienced is around respect. Mm. And I think that on my podcast, and I think it's also important to acknowledge here that neither of us are Japanese. And you have gone into this with the utmost respect to show it in the right light, to not try to commercialize it, but also in a sense that like you don't want the places to be like trampled with people. You just want to show how beautiful it is, how important. You might irk at this question because you're a very modest man, but how do you feel like some sort of necessity to continue to tell this story to more and more people?
Yeah, this is me for life. These people have become my family, just a minute from my house. So as luck would have it, in 2017, I was already researching and we'd started filming that year, and I moved from staying in the Love Hotel area in Shibuya, which, as you can imagine, for your soul it wasn't healthy. And I moved to an area called Shimokitazawa, and I didn't have proper visas, and I was a freelancer, and it's very difficult to get your own apartment in Japan unless you have a company behind you and a guarantor and all this stuff. So I was having to stay in what's known as a share house, which is the same thing as flatting here. And I was staying in a flat, and as luck would have it, next door to my house, this was completely by chance, was a 50-year-old jazz kisser run by this incredible woman called Misa. And Misa is now 93. And she, has been opening her jazz kisser, every day since 1973. And I really did not like my flat. That was quite jarring for a number of reasons, which I won't go into. So I would just spend all my time in her jazz kisser. And then she became my teacher, and she would just play me Ornette Coleman records or Eric Dolphy records. And that's, so these people became, that's what I hope that we can communicate through the series, is that these people, the people that run these places, it's not just a place to go and listen to some music. These are they serve a role in the community, and they serve you with music, but they're more than that. And, they're teachers, sometimes they're healers, they're all of those things rolled into one. And all of these people started to become slowly but surely my family. And, I'm in these places every day. Every second day, someone is coming from out of town, and I really want to share this in any way I can with people who I know will be into it, so that they can get a taste of the real thing. And I don't think this is ever going to change until the day I die. That's beautiful.
That's beautiful. No, it's really beautiful, because I think storytelling is part of culture. Storytelling is part of music culture. About for us to, I just went to this gentleman's record store, a few doors down, and I'm so bad at record shopping. I feel like I need to pick up one and just kind of read it for a while and understand it, because I just get overwhelmed otherwise. And I think the people that are able to introduce and give context around certain worlds is a really important thing. And I think that one thing I probably said to Nick on the day that we went is that it is, for want of a better word, surprisingly blue collar, these places, because it's very, especially in Sydney where I'm from, it's very white collar, like listening bars. It's very corporate. It's very we are here to sell you a cocktail, and there's also some music, and it happens to be jazz. Whereas these places, it's their collection, it's their experience. They are there to serve you music and also other things. And I felt that, and they were all old. And I don't mean that as it's interesting to me, because they're this gentleman from Ekigan.
Although we do need to add one thing, is that when Derrick came and we had he's I've got one evening, I was like, great, we're going to go to 5 places. And I was going to give him the, as best as I could, the greatest kind of taste in one night. We only did 2 places. But I was definitely, there were other places with more younger hosts.
Yeah, they're not all old.
Yeah.
They're not all old. But
those ones are very old,
This gentleman is in his 80s.
Yeah.
His computer was, I don't even know what era it was from. He was still
before Windows 95.
Yeah. But it was, I'm not used to stewards of music, fans of music who lived through it, to be I have collected this over 50, 60, 70 years, and I do it, and I live it, and I love it. And it's, and I don't want to over-romanticize it.
No, do it. It's do it.
It's cool. It's cool to be it's an old grandpa being look at my fucking jazz records. Sit down and enjoy and be quiet. And it's hell yeah.
You know what's amazing is that every single time, because I'm in Eigakan, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week. They live an hour away, but I'm just there so often because at the moment there's more tourists coming more than ever before. And every time, without doubt, that I bring someone who's a musician or someone who's going to be deeply into it from a country, he always pulls out a record from their country. And, just the other day, the band Phoenix were in town, and they were playing Summer Sonic, and they ended up going there, and he pulled out like a Michelle Porter record and put it on for them. And I just like, every time you go in there, he's got some deep obscure cut from the early 70s or the early 80s, like whatever. And he just loves sharing music with people. He just cannot wait to have people in there, especially people from overseas, who he knows will be receptive, so he can share music and kind of make them feel good, because they've got this, they probably didn't know that there's like an amazing lost, early 70s Australian free jazz scene that they never knew about.
Yeah.
So,
I know you mentioned this when we spoke on my podcast, but it's their service. Like it's a service. They're not trying to broadcast it to the world. They are there to give you a very specific experience.
Yeah.
That I guess is not something that I don't know if any other cultures do it in that way, where it really is like where taste and collecting is a profession that I really admire. In your travels of the world with Red Bull Music Academy, why is this Japan's expression of music enjoyment?
Sorry, rephrase the question. So,
I feel like, there's sound system culture in Jamaica and the surrounds. There's, in the West, in Australia, it's more festivals and club culture. Not to say they don't have those things in Japan, but this has been around for a long time. This feels very specific. This feels like something that, as much as we try to replicate it, if I opened one, I'd still be selling expensive cocktails and and want people to chat and have a good time. Whereas, why did this culture come? Like, why is it coming out of Japan of all places?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, and again, there's just so many different factors. But there's a number of reasons. Again, what I kind of started getting into and was trying to pull myself back from going too deep into history, but this Japanese fascination with the West that really happened in the early part of the 20th century, but especially World War II, basically after the war. As I said, no one could afford hi-fi, no one could afford records, and the only place that you could go and listen to music was one of these places in your community. And obviously, after the war, there were American bases, and there was an American occupation, and a lot of those American troops bought in jazz. So they bought in records. So you had a flood of all these records, and then, bit by bit, in every little kind of village or town or whatever you want to call it within Tokyo, someone would start up one of these places, and that became the place that you went to listen to music. And so, economic reasons, and it became the thing that people did. I mean, even when, the economy started to get stronger in the 1970s, and FM radio became a thing, Walkmans became a thing, obviously you were getting to a point where there were other ways to access the music that you wanted to hear. But somehow just the culture, it's managed to survive, because what became caked into the culture as well was that, if I'm going to open a jazz kisser, it has to have an incredible sound system. And what's an incredible sound system? And it's like, well, that guy down the road's got his system, that's really amazing. And, then that guy there. So you had to make sure that it was at that level or better. So that became a big part of it as well. And then you would go to these places and have these incredible sonic experiences, which FM radio or your Walkman could never compete with.
It's funny, the sound system thing feels like a little bit gets lost in translation. Good film. That when there's listening bars, jazz bars, whatever, in the West, in Melbourne, in Sydney, there are sound systems. And the sound systems, or big speakers, or whatever, or what have you. What I learned and what I found really interesting is that the sound system in these places, in the two places I went, granted, is very much an expression, as much of an expression of their personality 100%. And their decor. As is their service, as is the music that they curate. like it's an unusual concept to think that you might express yourself through a sound system.
Yeah.
But how did you tell me about some of those expressions of sound system that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. It's very different to how you see overseas. Those systems have been in those rooms for decades and decades and decades, and they have been built, expanded, tweaked, where it's like a living organism. It's like you're stepping into a living organism, and it's just, the sound system's just part of that organism. It's not like you compartmentalize and be like, well, those are the seats, and that's the serving area, and that's the sound system. It's just this giant whole. Aga Khan is definitely like that. Lion is definitely like that. And yeah, all of the sound systems are, I can't think of a single place where they opened in 1960 and went, okay, got a couple of JBLs and that's my lot. It's just like they're constantly tweaking them and updating things, buying parts, removing parts, so that they can get to the perfect sound that's in their head.
Are they trying to reach or access an era-specific sound that is most accurate to how it might have been experienced and appreciated at the time? Or are they just trying to find their system that means something to them?
Absolutely. It's the latter. Pretty much all of them are striving to create an environment where the customers can feel like they are hearing the musicians playing live. That's it. But they're kind of, each one might have a different version of what that is, but that's normally it. They want those records to sound the best they possibly can.
Talk to us about the different genres. There's so many, and I think it seems like it started with classical and jazz as the underpinnings of this, and that's why jazz kisser you might hear in lots of PR emails that you might get about new things opening, but it goes so much deeper than that. And there was an episode speaking about a particular kisser that was dedicated to ambient, and I think that's where I find it really interesting, and I feel like the West is yet to catch on to is like the hyper specificity of this expression. So we'd love to hear more about what you've heard out there. Yeah,
I mean, and the other thing is I need to write down, because you keep saying things and you inspire little things, but then you've missed, you go somewhere else. No, and I want to answer those questions. I think one of the things I need to point out, that why Japan, because that's one of the things you asked, why has it been able to kind of thrive? In New York, in London, in Sydney, in Melbourne, rent is really expensive, and there's like commercial realities of running places. Now, rents in Tokyo can be really expensive if you're in Ginza, if you're in Omotesando. But all these kinds of places like Shimokitazawa, where I live, or Koenji, or parts of Shinjuku, rents are really cheap, and they have kind of more or less stayed the same. So people can afford to create places that it's just a reflection of what they are. And the one key difference, if I was asked like, well, what is the key difference between the culture here and there? No one is doing it for money in Japan. No one is doing it for money. That was a question of mine. Like, how do they make money? Like this place. They just all they want to do is share this thing that they're into, and it's not like, oh, they're so grateful to have your patronage, and it's not like they get excited when you come. But it's more like you're really lucky that you randomly stumbled down that alleyway and off that alleyway, and you decided to open that door and you stepped into their world, because they're just happy to exist. That's all they want to do. And they have their regulars that support them, and that's enough for them. And that's the thing, is they're places of sharing with your community. And they're not like, I'm going to open I decided to open a jazz kisser in 1961 because I was going to get rich. It's purely, I'm really into all these new Eric Dolphy records, and I want to play them because no one else is playing Ornette Coleman and Eric Dolphy. So I'm going to open my spot and do something a bit different.
When I was at Lion, it was like, Lion was 6 times the size of this room, maybe, probably more.
Yeah.
There were like 4 people in there. There was a guy like in a corner. I could just see his like shoe and his sock and his glasses like upturned on the table. And I was like, how are they making money? Like, this is not a viable business strategy, you know? Like, it didn't make sense to me. And like, look, the decor could have been updated a little bit, you know? So they bought them in 1920 and haven't changed them, no.
I love that. I love that about it. I don't want them to, I don't want them to ever change.
And it just, as much as it is, you know, the war and the soldiers bringing things, there's an economic, not even motivator, but reason why these places can just sit with 4 people in it, mostly empty, and it'd be okay.
Yeah.
That also breaks my brain. I'm like, how? Like, I know you explained it, but it still doesn't make sense to me. Like, you're in the middle of Tokyo. This building is worth a lot of money, and you would walk past it. Like, it's an unremarkable building. It's quite like a haunted house type thing. It looks like that from the outside, but it's also like, you wouldn't be like, ooh, this is a really cool place that I should invite all my friends to.
I invite all my friends there. But that probably says a lot about me. I think everyone in this room that's been to Japan will get what I'm about to say, and that's one of the many, many reasons I love Japan so much, is because it's really interesting. I got fed this idea. My connection to Japan started really early. My older brother and sister are 8-10 years older than me, and basically when they went to university, when I was like 10, 11 years old, we had spare rooms in our house, and my parents decided to get Japanese homestay. And so I started, 3 times a year having Japanese homestay to stay with us. And, they always bought like, back then it was Hello Kitty and Kuropi, like Sanrio shit. And you're just like, who are those frogs? And just the design and like the way katakana was like cutified. And then one of them bought like a Super Famicom, a Game Boy and a Super Famicom. And you're just like, what? And then someone bought a mini disc player. And so that kind of obsession with Japan started really, really early. And where am I going with this? What was the last thing that you said?
It's Sunday night and I've had a red wine.
It's Sunday night. It's been a long day.
I just don't understand. Like,
okay.
The
I've got
economics of it. Like you say, they live across the road, some of them, and it shouldn't. Like they'd make like $200 a day or less.
Not all of them. I mean, one thing I'll say is like in the weekends it's a lot busier. But my point is that the best way to think about Japan, about Tokyo, is it's a city of endless doorways, and behind one of those doorways, a Japanese man or woman might have just built a temple devoted to the thing that they love, and that could be music or food or sneakers. The connective tissue that that fell by the wayside before was that I started researching Japan when I was a teenager. I started buying any books that I could. And I kind of got fed this myth that Japan was a homogenous society where everyone conformed and did the same thing. And, you had these images of salarymen going to work. But the Japan that I've found is one that is so more expressive, individual expression, than I've found in any other city in the world. And people are just happy to open up their little spot where they express themselves and what they love doing and sharing it with others. And this culture of ongaku kisa is part of that wider thing. And yeah, I mean, there are societies in the world where people are just happy to as long as they pay the bills, they're cool with that, and I think that's a really beautiful thing.
I feel like what you made me think about was because Tokyo in particular is so dense, it's also a place where you can be by yourself around other people. There's a bit of a community element to it, but you can also be alone. You also have a lot of people talk these days, especially around third spaces, yes, and the lack thereof. And these sort of third spaces where you can either be with friends or be by yourself and be in a space that is relaxing, that happens to have music around it as well. I feel like, this alchemy, if you will, comes from that as well, that density and the need for escape.
Yes.
And the Japanese people needing somewhere to escape to, which for us is like a latte and a laptop.
100%. And I think the one thing that you are, and again, we're talking about Lion specifically because, that was the place that you experienced. But, if you want to see very clearly the functional role that these places play in modern Japanese society, just go to Lion, because in order to get to Lion, you get out at Shibuya Station, you walk through Shibuya Crossing, and it is just insane. It's just madness. And then you go up the hill and it's still madness, and then you step into Lion and it's just this oasis of calm and, just insanity. And, that's they do play a very functional role in society. It's when people are all packed in together, and, somehow magically in Japan it all works. But definitely you need places like Jazz Kissa and these classical music cafes so that you can just have space.
There's a reason I asked this. Is there much of a yoga culture in Tokyo?
Yeah, there is, for sure. Why do you ask, Derrick?
I just want to get some classes when I'm there, I don't think obviously because we were on a whistle-stop tour, I didn't transcend. I didn't evaporate into various molecules and travel around the room.
No, not at all.
I tried, but I didn't manage it. But I feel like and you've spoken about this before.
Can I just say that one of the reasons why we weren't able to transcend at the Jazz Kissa is that we were a young French couple playing cards and talking really loudly in French.
That's true.
They got in the way of my transcendence.
I feel like it is a place where you can practice meditation in a sense. That I guess why, and I'm trying to express to you guys why it's jarring to me, because we go to places to meditate. We go to places for people to tell us how to relax and whatnot. And yoga might be part of that as well, as much as it is exercise. But I feel like these places, you've expressed yourself that you found a lot of respite in these places, a lot of calm. And I feel like if you were to go enough, that you can sink into that mode a lot quicker. Absolutely. Whereas I'm looking around hyper aware of everything, just kind of like trying to like breathe it all in.
Yeah.
But you were kind of straight into it. You were like mellow as just chilling out, and I was staring at him, going, "Wow, this is a serious guy," But
did I have jazz face on?
Yeah, classical stank face on. Right. Yeah, but yeah, I that's also because I think it's worthwhile what you share with me on my podcast. It's worthwhile talking about like your past, your personal kind of desire to find a place like that.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of touched on a lot of those things when I was kind of talking about how I kind of came to go into to Cafe Line at the first time. But yeah, I was, at that point in my life, I'd gotten to a point in my life where I was making some, really serious changes in my life, and I was, I moved to Japan for a number of reasons, but one of them, the main ones, was to fall in love with music again and to have a very pure connection to music again, and one that was kind of untainted by drugs and alcohol and stimulants. And so all of that was also happening at the same time. And I started to find that hit, I guess, that I was looking for through listening to records on these sound systems. And I started to chase that, going to different places to experience different sound systems. And I literally would have those transcendent moments. It took me a long time. Look, I'm not going to lie. Like when I first started going to these places, it was wonderful. But also like, I was like, are the regulars going to be like pissed off at me being here? Am I killing their vibe just by being here? I was overthinking as well. But thankfully after a while I stopped overthinking, and in fact, at times, at periods in the first few years that I was in Japan where everything was overwhelming, and I was, for the first time in life, suffering from really real anxiety, and encountering that and kind of bits of depression for the first time. Those places were places that I could go, and it was like an opiate. I would go and I would stop thinking.
Like a monastery.
Yeah, it was just, they were really places of healing. And so that's what they are. And I'm able to kind of go deep and just focus on listening when I go there.
It's funny because in the West, I say generalizing, I feel like, and this is no offense to anyone that enjoys this type of stuff, but it has to be like, okay, we're going to play an album, we're going to turn all the lights off, and you're going to have to close your eyes, because that's how we can control you to be able to relax and be like with the music, as opposed to we're just going to play an album and you can just sit. It feels like we have to design that context a lot more because it's not ingrained within our culture to turn up and turn up and turn up.
Isn't that really sad? I think that's the one thing, to go back to the beginning, and I know it's not just me. The reason why I wanted to make this series was because I knew so many people like me, all my friends, people that I worked with, were kind of going through a similar thing. Like, all of my friends love music, but like no one's listening really anymore, and
it's very hard to concentrate.
But isn't that sad? Like, it's like we are just so distracted, and we allow ourselves to be distracted. I'm just old enough. Well, not just old enough, but I remember, seeing my dad sitting with the albums that he loved with his headphones in front of his system. I remember, buying tapes myself and just listening to that one tape over and over again. And especially in the early 90s, buying like Nirvana's Nevermind. You buy it for, the lead single, which names escape me all of a sudden, which is terrible. That goes to show how long the day is. But then little by little, you fall in love with Lithium or Bleach or whatever it is. You just slowly but surely you just listen to that album repeated. And I think all of those things, the album not getting the respect it deserves, and just the art of listening not being given anything anymore. I feel like this is what I was looking for, and a lot of my friends are looking for.
I'm glad you said that, because I feel like I can be quite cynical about seeing a lot of listening bars, jazz bars, listening cafes pop up around Australia, and be like, it's not done right. It's not the real thing. But I think that whilst there is a commercial desire to capitalize on this trend, it perhaps is also that feeling that a lot of us are feeling of not really having that same connection to recorded music as we used to. And that it's weird to kind of, not everyone's the same age here. There's a span, but I'm going to generalize. And I think a lot of us remember a time where you would buy an album if you were lucky, a week if you were lucky, and maybe it stunk and you just had to deal with it. Or it stunk and then you listened to it enough and it became your favorite record.
Yeah.
And that was that. And now it's like, if you don't know about the thing that just came out yesterday that is the new thing that won't be the next thing, like Chapel Roan, you have to know about Chapel Roan. You have to know about it, right? Whereas it's like, if you can't afford the CD, you didn't get the CD, then you don't know about it, and maybe you won't for a while. And I feel like it's nice to hear you say this stuff, because maybe that cynicism dissipates a little bit, knowing that we're perhaps all wanting to find these spaces and places that we can connect again with recorded music and kind of meditate in our own way.
I think all of it is a win for the culture in general. I think, the more people that, even if they're not getting it right, that's okay. But as long as people are thinking like, oh yeah, maybe I need to kind of rethink the way I get my music, I engage with music, I think it's a win for everybody. And I think the more people that come out to any of these places and think, hey, yeah, or they get inspired by a place and they want to do it themselves. I think, yeah, I definitely don't want to be cynical about any of it, you know?
And I've not seen the latter 3 episodes of the documentary series, but I know you explore the evolution of it, the future of it, without giving too much away. What excites you about how it's evolving?
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting where it is at the moment. It's, you know, there's more young people opening these places than ever before. And, you know, what's really exciting about the culture now is you know, all these places, these kind of legendary jazz kisa that were started in the 60s, you know, the people that ran them back then were in their 20s. They were young people. And now you're seeing a lot of 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds opening their own version of it. And it's very much everyone's kind of doing their own take on it, not just trying to replicate the past. And the thing that I love the most, and you know, the last few months especially, it's been incredible, especially in my neighborhood alone. All of these new places that they play primarily jazz, but they also play kind of ambient and just listening records, you know, like Fabiano Nascimento, Gigi Mason, you know, new releases by these records. So what they're doing is, in the same way that the Jazz Kisa were playing all those big records by Miles Davis or Charles Mingus or Nick Coleman, whatever the big new record was at the time, in real time, all these places now are playing new releases. And so all I want is to get to a place where all of my analog music discovery is done outside in spaces. And I'm sitting there with Shazam, just going, what the hell is this? What the hell is this? And it's not just, you know, it's through record shops, it's through all these listening bars, but also I've got like key restaurants that I go to. I've got this like curry spot in my neighborhood that just plays like awesome tapes from Africa, latest releases. And so there's all that expression as well. But I'm just doing so much Shazamming now in these new Kisa because they're playing new releases. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm hearing these new releases in real time on an amazing sound system and going, what the hell is this? Rather than it coming up on a Spotify weekly discovery playlist.
Yeah, wow.
That's what I'm really excited about.
This is why I'm going to open a Drake Kisa. So we can listen to all the Drake as soon as it comes out.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah.
Do it. I mean, yeah. Sure. You know, what?
But kind of someone should, you know, like
it will happen. I'm sure it's going to happen.
It's
But yeah, I think that's I mean, there's two things. One is that the future's in, you know, as you kind of alluded to before, there's kind of a misconception a little bit, and it's just through lack of media visibility, is that what's kind of traveled a lot is jazz kisa and the concept of jazz kisa, and it's often these photos of you know, an older guy and a sound system,
vinyl
and vinyl, and also a lot of the times, a lot of the places that photograph there don't necessarily have a really strong relationship with the owners. So the owners of the places will be like, yep, you can take some photos, but don't shoot any of the customers and don't shoot me. So what you get is detail shots or empty rooms. And I think a lot of people have gone, oh, it's a dying culture. Oh, no one's there. But the reality is there are customers there. You're just not seeing them. And there are young people. It's not just old people. So
there was a couple at Ekigan, a young couple, they were like early 20s on a date, and they'd never been to something like that, and it was so sweet.
It was really sweet. So yeah, all of those things are exciting about like this new generation of places that are opening, but also that I feel like, because again, a question that you asked ages ago and I didn't answer it properly, is it always has been every twist and turn of music. Twist and turn of modern music has been represented by a ongaku kisa over the last 100 years. Everything from, you know, there's a tango kisa in Jimbocho that just plays Argentine tango music. There's an ongaku kisa music bar that just plays noise and drone. You know, it's literally everything, and that's what I love about living in Tokyo, is I know that even, you know, dedicating so much time as I do to hunt down new spots, I still don't know shit. I've still only found the tip of the iceberg. I just know that, you know, there is every genre imaginable just down that street or that street. And yeah, and as we talked about on your podcast, I'm really excited to see how this culture now evolves around the world, and we start seeing geographic kind of specific listening bars, ongaka kisa, where like it could only really have happened in London that you get that particular genre, or New York. Yeah, that's what I'm really excited about.
I feel like we really have a desire for experts of something.
Yeah.
I think we have to be like a master of, like everyone's kind of a master of none. We all kind of know a little about a lot.
Yes.
And oh yeah, yeet. I've got to have an opinion on yeet. Like what? You know, but it's kind of how the world works these days. And I think hopefully we can walk away from this kind of maybe caring more about a little and maybe showing people some things. And I think that when you talk about Shazam, it really resonated with me recently, because I guess my channels, for what you will, have grown because I'm someone that is passionate about music and can tell people, can kind of connect some stories together, and people get excited by that because maybe it's very fast information. And I think that there's a desire for people to hear from people that know some things and are passionate and excited by things. And Shazam is a very magical app where you have to be out in the open and the music has to be played in the air.
Yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah.
You know, because it's mostly directly into our ears. And it's, I don't think we experience it the same. I don't think we get the same feeling out of it. I feel like, and I'm sure everyone in this room has had the experience at some point in our lives where there'll be a song that you've kind of just thought was whatever. But if it's played out at the right time, it's weird how music can change.
Yeah.
It transforms into a new thing, and it's your favorite song ever.
That's it. I think. Sorry.
No.
I interrupted you.
No.
But I think that's it. I think that you know, music there's you know, obviously it's the music, you know, that you're listening to, but then it's the memory, that the association that you have with that track. That's what makes it so memorable and meaningful for you. And if you're just sitting at home and you heard it for the first time on a Spotify playlist, you don't have an association with it. But if you remember every single time where you heard it and everything, then it becomes something special. And
it's very much like time travel, and it's very much like a time capsule where it's like smells. We all know we have those certain smells from our childhood where you smell something even now, and you know exactly, like I know like a certain smell of a certain toy I might open, and I could smell it in something random and be like, I know that memory. And music can be that kind of like Google Map pin for your brain where you go, I know where I was, I know what I was feeling, I know what I was into. And maybe that's the point of these places, is to kind of give you more of those points on the map to remember things and feel things a bit more. To wrap up, how should one approach, hopefully one day, everyone, if you haven't been to these places, and I hadn't until 3-4 weeks ago, if one was to go to these places, how, as someone who has become a bit of a custodian, a translator, a fan of these places, how should one?
I all I'll call myself is a fan. I just love it.
As a fan,
yes.
How would you advise that one treats these spaces, enters these places, respects these places? How best to treat it to kind of pay respect to what it is?
I think now that I've heard you speak on your experience, I would the first thing I'd say is don't overthink it, and don't think you're doing anything wrong. Just go in there with, as cliche as it sounds, like an open heart and an open ears. I don't know. It's just, I think the one thing that has happened a lot recently that I've found myself saying to people, and it's not just about Japan, it's just in general, but it very much applies to Japan, is that everyone always hits you up for lists. They're like, hey, I'm going to Japan. Or they tag someone, they're like, oh, my friend's going to Japan. Can you give me all your spots?
We've all done it.
And I just keep saying to people, I'm like, nah. Because the best things that can happen to you in that city, especially in a city like Tokyo, where it's so safe, is just fall into the river. Like, just fall into the river and just, like, you and your mate getting lost, crazy lost, then lost again, and then stumbling upon a place and you saw, like, a little weird lantern and you decided to go in, and then this Japanese man and woman invited you in and they cooked you the best meal, and then that becomes your favorite place. That will trump anything that I can recommend or you can recommend. It's the things that you create yourself. And I just think just go and explore. It's all good to say, like, and that's the other thing I want to be really, I really want to point out is, yes, for the series, there was certain kind of criteria and a story that, you know, I wanted to tell with the places, but I'm not saying, like, these are the 6 greatest ongaku kisa and everything else is shit. It's like all of them are amazing for their own reasons. And, you know, earlier on today, you mentioned that blue collar aspect of it, and I just was reminded, like, every single time I get on a train and go out of Tokyo and go into the deep, deep provinces, that's when the culture is really, really special. And you've got these big places, amazing sound systems, and it'll just be you and one other dude, and he, like, literally for a job, you know, lays roads. He's just a roadman. And then all of it, you just find yourself sitting next to this guy, and both of you are having the deepest moment to, like, Keith Jarrett live in Cologne. And it's just, that sort of stuff is beautiful when it's magic and it happens. And yeah, I understand now, you know, I think anyone that's read Haruki Murakami, you're like, whoa, that magic surrealism that he does, gosh, that's so crazy. But then you get, it's almost, that's how it is in Japan, in Tokyo. I've found that magic for real. And I think that the best thing you can do is just go out and, yeah, let the river kind of take you to all these places.
I remember when I got there and I walked around with you a little bit, and I was so grateful. And because I don't want to sugarcoat that Japan doesn't have its own issues, and it's this paradise of appreciation and meditation. But I think that what is nice about this particular conversation and others like it is that I think, and perhaps this is speaking as an Asian man, I think that I see a lot of content where Japan is presented as weird. Japan is presented as a bit subversive and not in a nice way.
That's one of the reasons why I also decided that I need to make documentaries showing the Japan that I was experiencing, because it was around the time 2011, 12, 13, 14, and Vice in particular at that time were doing a lot of really, really clickbaity,
they were
weird Japan shit. It was always Yakuza, octopus porn, and maids, and I would be like, that's not the Japan that I'm coming across. And me and Tu and Tim, who who made A Century in Sound, 10 years ago we made Digging in the Carts, and kind of a documentary series called Digging the Carts, which is about the history of kind of Japanese video game music and how influential it was on the world of music. And one of the main things that we wanted to present was to show visually the Japan that we were seeing, which was diametrically opposed to the Japan that Vice were presenting. And unfortunately, what I've realized, because there were periods where to earn money, I was doing like research jobs on foreign crews where you'd write the research and then some English or American director would come in and be like, all right, I'm going to direct this thing. And all of them, their only source material were the Vice things. And they were like, well, I saw this thing about panties, so I'm going to do another thing about panties. Or, oh, yeah, there's the girls that do the thing with the earbuds, and they want to do that story again. And everyone just wanted to repeat the weirdness because it was just easier to... And they would none of them would come here and do research. They would just get the shots that they needed to tell the story that they'd already decided they wanted to tell when they were back in their home country. And I found that really sad because, and again, I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. And, like any other country, there's definitely negative things and there's issues. But the Japan that I know and I've immersed myself in is one of really beautiful, wonderful, passionate people. And that's the Japan that I want to show to the world.
And I think that's really beautiful. And I think that hopefully, as we conclude this with this chat, I reflect upon a lot about what I do and what resonates with people. You can clearly see what resonates with Nick and what he does so well, which is just the sheer passion and drive and ability to synthesize this and with a lot of purity. And I think what hopefully you get out of this is not just, oh, I want to go to Japan, I want to go to Tokyo and see these places, but is a thought about intention, a thought about listening, a thought about practice, a thought about expertise, a thought about culture, a thought about how so many different steps in a random order, create something special that maybe can't be recreated anywhere else. But that doesn't mean where we are now isn't at the start of a new culture that is being created with places. Umut, thank you for having us at High Note. Is new places and spaces where people are being inspired to create new things that may be successful, may not be, maybe something that inspires the next generation to do the next thing to create that complicated culture where we can appreciate things like music in a place that I think we need as a community and as a society. So with that, as the community that's sitting here today, I thank you so much for coming. And I thank you, Nick Dwyer.
Thank you, Derrick,
for this conversation.